Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Agent Development Live. I'm Madeline Flanagan, the Vice President of Agent Development for the Big I. And joining me today is my lovely co-host, Jennifer Becker, the Director of Education Programs for the Big I. And also joining us today is the President and CEO of AffinityHR, Claudia St. John, who is our lovely, lovely HR expert. Welcome, Jennifer, and welcome, Claudia.
Hello.
So today we're going to be talking about all the HR trends going into 2021. And can you believe it's already the end of the March?
I know. It's a warp speed year, it looks like.
It really has gone by so fast. So today we're going to this is season 2, episode 5. We've been doing this for, almost a year.
So, I believe so, yeah.
So today we're going to talk about President Biden's agenda, as well as the American, now I've lost it in my head, the American Rescue Plan Act. There's so many acts out there. I got to tell you, the American Rescue Plan Act. Yes. So let's talk about the act first, and then we'll jump into President Biden's agenda and how it might affect HR.
Sure thing. So the American Rescue Plan Act is massive, right? So it is like a 1.9 trillion package with tons of money for lots of things. So there is just so much to unpack in this massive spending bill, including individual stimulus paychecks to families and individuals. Federal government has bumped up a subsidy to the unemployment, state unemployment at $300 additional weekly benefit. So there's a lot there. They threw more money at the Paycheck Protection Loan and the Emergency Disaster Relief Loan and lots of other things. But I think for agency owners, there are two pieces to this massive act that are important. One is that last year, the CARES Act, or the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, put in place the requirement that businesses under 500 employees offer paid sick leave and paid family leave for those who are out under certain conditions and criteria for COVID. That act expired in December, but the previous administration made it voluntary through March 31st, so through yesterday. So any business under 500 employees that wanted to continue to offer this paid sick leave or paid family leave could continue to do so and get any payments made under that program reimbursable by the federal government. So the first thing that's important for folks to know is that the American Rescue Plan Act could keep that voluntary. So it does not mandate it. But if you are continuing to provide family leave or sick leave under that program, it extends it through September 30th. So that voluntary program continues through September 30th. It also does a couple of really interesting things. The paid sick leave, which was 10 days or 80 hours of paid sick leave at full pay up to $551 a day, it extends that and it resets the clock. So now you have a whole new bank of 80 hours or 10 days for sick leave. So somebody who exhausted their paid sick leave up through yesterday now has a new refreshed bank of sick leave. They didn't do that with the paid family leave. So the paid family leave still was 12 weeks of pay. The first 2 were unpaid. The last 10 were 2/3 of pay up to $200 a day. So they did not reset that clock, but what they did do is they made the first 2 weeks paid. So now it's 12 weeks at 2/3 of pay. And they also extended all of the reasons why you would be out on sick leave now applied to paid family leave. So if you are sick or if a family member is sick, you now can use that paid family leave. Prior, it was only for those who are out to tend to children whose schools or daycares were canceled. So they've basically expanded the reasons why you can use paid family leave. And they also added to that time off to get vaccinated and recuperative time if you're sick as a result of it, or if you have long haul COVID, you could be taking this leave as well. So it expanded the reasons for being able to take paid family leave. So it resets the clock on the paid sick leave, and then it extends new reasons to be able to take the paid family leave, and it makes the first 2 weeks payable as well.
Now, Claudia, when you said that it was voluntary, can you clarify? Yes. So it's voluntary for the business to choose whether or not they want to participate and go through the process of getting the reimbursement.
Correct. So it's only voluntary from the employer's perspective as an agency. If you do not choose to offer this leave, you do not need to, and then that paid leave would not be eligible for your employees. They would simply have to rely on whatever PTO they would have available, or if you have family medical leave, if your 50 employees are larger and you have FMLA, you could take unpaid FMLA.
Is it a complicated process for the reimbursement? I'm curious why, if it's available, you wouldn't do that for your employees.
I think, no, it's not complicated at all. In fact, you don't have to validate anything. You should be filling out the forms and following the criteria and tracking the time. So it is kind of a record keeping, but all you're doing is deducting what you're paying in payroll taxes, federal payroll taxes. You're just deducting that federal payment by the same amount that you're paying out. So you, and if you do not pay enough in federal payroll taxes, then you can actually apply for and get a credit when you file your taxes the following year. So they should definitely be talking to their accountants and their financial planners about it. But no, it's not arduous, and there's really you don't have to apply for, there isn't anything special. They can reach out to us at Affinity HR Group, and we can give you the forms that you would need to have completed to validate that this leave is reimbursable by the federal government. But the reason why I think employers are not doing it is because I think maybe they suspect that there might be abuse. People are taking advantage of the program, or they're really just looking for a good stick to get folks back in the office. This really applies for paid family leave. If you have folks who are out tending to child and daycare, if you're no longer paying for them to do that, they've got to figure out a plan B or C in order to get back into the office. And I think that may be part of the incentive.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
And before you go on, can you explain the 2 weeks added back in on the 2 weeks and how that works?
Sure. So under the previous incarnation, the paid family leave was 12 weeks, but the first 2 weeks were unpaid. So you could use the first 2 weeks of the paid sick leave, which provided for folks who are out to tend to children at 2/3 of pay. You could apply that. That would qualify as your first 2 weeks of unpaid, and then you could go on to your full pay, the remaining 10 weeks. And what they were finding was some people were sick and used that sick leave, and then when they had to tend to their children, they had this gap where they had no coverage. And so what they did is they said, we're just going to pay all the way through at 2/3 of pay, and that would apply to those whether or not they exhausted family leave, the sick leave. And now if you are out sick or you're a long haul COVID person, you now can take this 2/3 of pay leave, whereas you weren't eligible for it before. It was meant that the paid sick leave and the paid family leave would sort of overlap. And so now they're saying that we're going to look at them separately. This, you get a fresh bank, and this now you don't have that first 2 weeks unpaid.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't really know why. I'll tell you the one thing that's confusing about it, and it led to a lot of us kind of scratching our heads. When you follow these massive bills, and when they first come out, you're like, wait, what? And the wait, what on this was, why did you restart the clock on the paid sick leave and not the family leave? But then you offered this additional family leave. Well, what happens if they've already taken 6 weeks of this paid family leave? Do they now get the benefit of that first 2 weeks now paid or not? Like, these are all kind of like, it doesn't really make sense. And I think it's because we don't really know what the intent was. And so, as with all of these things, we'll probably know in a few weeks once the Department of Labor or the IRS or the Small Business Administration, whomever, gives us the details on it. But it still doesn't make that make sense.
So are there other things we need to know about this act and how it might affect?
Yeah, actually, one other big piece, and this is a really big piece, which is anybody who was let go or who had their hours reduced significantly involuntarily from April 1st going forward will now be eligible for having all of their COBRA coverage paid 100% by the federal government. So anyone who you let go or you reduce their hours from now on will be eligible for having their COBRA paid entirely from now through September 30th. But it also has a look back. So anyone who previously was let go or had their hours reduced, and if they had accepted COBRA would still be on COBRA, or if they declined COBRA are still within their COBRA eligibility period, you have to go back and open up that voluntary election so that employees know, previous employees know, you now can have COBRA paid for fully by the federal government. The employer will pay it and get it back from the federal government from April 1st through September 30th. So anybody who you let go from now going forward has 100% COBRA premiums paid. Anyone you've already let go, if they're still within that window, so let's say you let them go in, October or whenever, and let's pretend that their COBRA eligibility expires July 15th. You would need to notify them that from today, April 1st, through July 15th, you can get 100% of your COBRA premium subsidized. It doesn't extend their COBRA premium. It doesn't give them any additional time. It just gives them the opportunity to have this period of pay covered. For them, their dependents, their spouses.
That's a tremendous benefit. Tremendous benefit.
Tremendous benefit. It does not apply for people who were let go for cause. And causality is, again, another one of those, well, what does that mean? Because that sometimes is in the eye of the beholder. So we've seen this before, and it's usually gross misconduct as defined in certain terms. But again, if you do your best effort to qualify, to vet that this was involuntary on the employee's part, you should be talking to your insurance carrier to go back and do a look at who would be eligible, who was within that election period, reach out to them and give them the opportunity to elect benefits for themselves, their spouses, their dependents through September 30th.
So the employer has to do it, just so I understand. So if I had been let go and was paying my own COBRA premium, I can't apply on behalf of myself.
You probably will already be notified because you're currently in a relationship with the carrier to pay those payments. So you probably will already be notified. It's the people who are like, that's 100%, 100 and maybe 2% of insurance premiums. I can't afford that if I'm unemployed. I decline coverage. Those who would still be covered if they had elected it, those are the folks you need to go back and notify and give them the opportunity to get this coverage for the next few months.
I mean, that's something that everybody needs to be talking about, because I can't imagine how many people probably turned it down because they just couldn't afford it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not only for the employee, it's their dependents and their spouses, right? Anybody who's on that group coverage plan should now be looking at this. It's not forever. It doesn't give you any, it doesn't reset the clock, but I mean, who wouldn't do it? The reason not to elect COBRA coverage is either because you got picked up by another client or by another employer who had coverage, or because you can't afford it. And this addresses that question.
Great. That's really good.
Well, I'd like to kind of talk about vaccines and vaccinations. I've been seeing a lot of organizations that are deciding to incentivize the process by a bonus or a day off, or some sort of way to use a carrot instead of a stick. So what are your thoughts as far as agencies and our members, whether they should encourage or they should mandate getting their employees vaccinated?
So that's a really great question. One thing that we do know is that the EEOC has said that definitively, yes, you can mandate that an employee get vaccinated, and that's within your right as an employer. But they created a couple big caveats. One is that you have to provide reasonable accommodation for those who, because of a health condition, can't take the vaccine, or because of a sincerely held religious belief, cannot get a vaccine. So if you're going to mandate it, you have to make sure that you provide reasonable protections for those who, reasonable accommodations for those who can't take it. But then you get into a squirrely area, because just mandating it, you're fine. But when you start asking, well, why? Why can't you get the vaccine? And did you get the vaccine? And if not, why? Or we're going to offer a $600 incentive for those to get a vaccine, but if you can't get a vaccine, you don't get that $600 because you're so all of these things, you have to be very careful to make sure that you're not creating, unintentionally, of course, a disparate treatment of people who probably are protected either because of a health condition or because of a sincerely held religious belief. You're dealing with a population who, by their very nature, is probably protected, and you need to be very careful about that. And that applies both whether you're creating incentives or whether you're mandating. And let's say somebody comes to you and says, I can't get a vaccine. What are you going to say? Why? So, and that can be a little tricky. So, because if they're just doing it because they don't like the vaccines, or they don't want to put an experimental vaccination in their arm, they're not protected. But if they also have lupus and can't take this vaccine, they are protected, and you don't know. So it's a very tricky situation. I would encourage you to talk with folks. We're basically saying, at this point, I wouldn't go to mandate. I would start with strongly encouraging. Strongly encouraging by rolling up your sleeve and being the first person to get a shot, bring in a healthcare provider to explain the side effects and what to do, offer time off for those who are able to get a vaccine or maybe need to recuperate from a vaccine. And if you're going to do some kind of financial incentive, make it as a group. You know, we as an agency are 90% vaccinated, and that 90%, you can either count the people who can't take it as vaccinated, or you take them off the top and don't include them in your numbers and celebrate it that way. But you just need to be really careful, because yes, you can mandate it, but once you peel back just a little bit of the layer there, you can see the ability or the vulnerability of violating somebody's privacy rights or anti-discrimination because of a firmly held religious belief or a medical condition.
Right. So in some cases, I feel like the choice has been politically decided, and that could get very ugly. So yes, I see it could get a little sticky.
Well, and to that point, Jennifer, if you had a hard time getting folks to wear masks, if you had a hard time getting folks to socially distance, you know, this is going to be a much heavier thing to carry. The other thing I'll say about this is what's really interesting is that there are certain states that are moving ahead with trying to mandate some level of workplace vaccination as a way of kind of getting herd immunity. And then we're seeing states that are mandating that employers cannot mandate this vaccine. Again, political, irrespective of public health. But yeah, it's still a political football, unfortunately, and that's another reason why we encouraging as opposed to mandating.
I did see this morning, I was reading an HR column that some lady said that their employer was calling everyone and asking them had they gotten their vaccine and if they had back to work. So can they do that?
Yes, they can. You may ask whether or not they were vaccinated or whether or not they intended to get vaccinated, and then stop. Don't go any further than that. I had a really interesting question about whether or not you could ask a prospective hire whether they intended to get vaccinated. And again, you got to be super careful, because if the answer is no, are you going to ask why? Because if it's a health condition and you choose not to hire them, you're in hot water. And if the answer is it's political and you choose not to hire them, you may be less in hot water, but you may still be in a little bit of a stew. I just think it's you may ask. Okay. You may ask employees whether or not they've been vaccinated, and I would encourage you to be careful for prospective employees. And I think your question should be full stop. All right, do you plan to, have you been vaccinated? Yes, no. And then you
that's a complete sentence.
Yeah, I think that's the safest bet. But yeah. I imagine in terms of the decision whether to return to the office and open your business back up, that comes into play. So what are you seeing, and what are your thoughts on the return to the office? Should everyone still be continuing the remote work, or we're getting vaccinated, let's get our lives and our businesses back? What are you seeing? What do you think?
Well, of course, you would want to see a fully vaccinated workplace before you bring folks back. And for those who are not able to get vaccinated, that you would continue to provide them with the accommodation of working at home, or until, we get farther along down this path. So yeah, having folks vaccinated as a way of getting the office up and running is an important thing. I will tell you, and this is anecdotal, but it is a client of mine, 100% of their workforce got vaccinated. They're all vaccinated. They're all past their 2 weeks of vaccination. And they have folks that do not want to go back to work full time. Mm-hmm. And that's a separate issue, right? They've had a bite at an apple that tasted pretty good, that workplace flexibility, and they don't want to go back. And especially, folks, younger generations, they're balancing work-life requirements and obligations. And so this is a real issue. And we have folks who are saying, excuse the expression, but I want all butts in all seats. I want that. I need that going forward. And we get it. But you may lose good talent, because you may have folks that say, you know what, I've been working remotely. I did just fine. And now I have potential, job offers from agencies that are all across the United States. I don't have to work for you. So, I think that's sort of the workplace trend of the future that we're going to talk about in a little bit, is this hybrid workplace. Folks are like, I don't buy into it at all. Great. But if all the talent that you're looking at does buy into it and wants some degree of flexibility, at least if not 100% working from home, at least maybe 1 day a week or a couple days a month or whatever it is, you're going to be at a disadvantage in terms of hiring and keeping top talent without doing that. But yes, I think waiting for folks to get vaccinated to come back to the office is not a bad idea. We've seen a lot of agencies that brought them back long before that, who are just continuing to mask. That's another thing we hear, that you should continue to mask until everybody is vaccinated and everybody is safe and everybody's, socially distancing and washing their hands. We're still stuck with masks.
And I'm sure we're going to still see people fighting about it too. So,
what else would we do if we can't fight about these things? I mean, I don't know. Take up needling or knitting or whatever. I don't know.
Get a hobby.
A hobby? Wow, I don't know. Okay, maybe.
But it is interesting, because a lot of schools haven't gone back to, here in Fairfax County, Virginia, we're not back full time yet, 2 days a week. So if it goes into the summer or the fall like that, people really can't return to work, to the office, but they're working. So
absolutely. And we're the same way here, and we're going to be we're opening it up bit by bit. And yet my son just went, he moved into his freshman dorm on Monday. And he's in lockdown isolation. So it's just a patchwork quilt. And I know folks who are in Florida, they've been open the whole time. Right. Up here in the Northeast, we've been locked down. It just is not, there's no consistency around it. And so I think it's just using your best judgment. But I do encourage agencies that are considering doing some form of innovative opening or asking around vaccines, reach out to us, because you do not want to be violating people's, rights under the ADA, under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. There's just so many pieces to this puzzle. It seems like it's clear sailing, but there are definite landmines to be aware of.
I would like to look back in history when we had to get the polio vaccine. Was there this kind of pushback? And we had to get a vaccine to go to school. The next generation didn't have to. But I just wonder, were people pushing back like they're pushing back on this? It's very interesting.
I think our body politic, we are so divided now, and we have such few opportunities to come together as a country to really celebrate something. It's unfortunate this isn't one of them. And I don't know. I think that we saw ourselves as individuals, but also part of a common good back then that we need to get back to.
Yeah.
People don't, when the seatbelt laws were enacted, they didn't like seatbelt laws and motorcycle helmet laws, but I think this too shall pass, and it'll settle down. Whether that's a year or 2 years from now, we'll just have to find out.
Exactly.
Right. But before we go on to the next topic, I do want to switch up and talk about President Biden's agenda and how that might affect the HR world.
The laugh.
Yeah, I think so. No, I think we do expect a lot to happen. Now, the Democrats hold the White House, the Senate, and the House. So obviously, as progressives, they have a lot of workplace initiatives that they would like to roll out, a lot of progressive policies that they would like to roll out, things such as increasing the minimum wage nationally, things such as paid family leave, paid sick leave. So there definitely are a lot of initiatives out there. The problem is that the Democrats don't have a monolithic view on these things, particularly in the Senate. We see some members of that caucus are much more conservative and do not want to see some of these initiatives. For example, the minimum wage. There is a concern among some more conservative Democrats in the Senate that would really hurt small businesses and enterprises while we're still trying to move forward with an economic recovery. And so I don't think it's going to be as smooth sailing for the Biden administration to get through some of the things that they would like to get through. But there's some things that are a little bit less controversial. The things that we do expect him to want to get and maybe get or maybe not get are things such as minimum wage, paid family leave, paid sick leave, some revisit of marijuana on a federal level, looking at pay equity and ban the box and things of that sort that are kind of larger initiatives. Pay equity would be an easy one. Just don't ask people their previous salary history and don't base future salary on past history. That would be an easy initiative. I expect we would see something like that. We're also expecting Biden to be very pro-union. So we've already seen him put some very pro-union directors on the National Labor Relations Board, wanting to see things such as easier collective bargaining agreements, easier union organizing, micro-union, micro-unit, pro-labor friendly opportunities going forward. So we're definitely going to see that sort of thing. Immigration is also going to be a very important topic for this administration, not only because of the crises on the border, but also when we have worker visas coming in and refugee populations that all contribute to that. So we do expect to see a lot of these things, but the one thing you can bet your bottom dollar on is that what Biden does have control over is enforcement of the departments and agencies that are currently responsible for workplace enforcement, like OSHA, like the EEOC, like the Department of Labor. So we do expect there to be much more pro-union, pro-worker protections, investigations going forward. And it's going to be between that and the fact that a lot of states are also moving forward with this. we're busy. We are very, very busy keeping track of this and keeping our members up to date going forward. And there is an issue, I think we're going to talk about remote work in a second, right? Because I do have a red flag on that I want to talk with folks about. But
also want to point out that your organization did a very good write-up on the American Rescue Plan Act for us, and we have it on our coronavirus page. So if anybody wants to go there and download it, it's a really great analysis from an employee's view as well as an employer's view. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, let's before we go on to the next, let's talk a little bit more about remote work and your concern.
Yeah, so I think the issue with remote work, we are expecting remote work to be around for a while. And one of the things that folks did not necessarily contemplate when they let their employees, whether they're producers or their account managers or whatever, when they let them go home, they might have gone home, or they might have gone to Mother's, or they might have gone to the beach, or they might have gone somewhere else. And when they did that, there may not have been a realization that employee doing that work for you in that other state may have to pay payroll tax in that state. You may be responsible for unemployment, workers' compensation payments in that state. There may be labor laws in that state that you're unaware of that you need to be compliant with. So I would ask everybody to take stock of their remote workforce, and if they know that anyone has left the state in which they normally reside, in which they normally pay taxes and do all that good stuff, if there's somewhere other than that, you need to give us a call or give your attorney a call, because you may be needing to pay. There might be an IRS and a Department of Labor and a state, and the state that you're in and the state that they're in, there may be implications to that. So that's very important.
Wow, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, and I just don't think that a lot of employers, because I think it was sort of like everyone's like, okay, break, right? And hopefully this will be over in a week and a half. And 1 year later, we're still here. So now is the time to make sure, if we're going to be doing this for a while, to make sure that you're not liable for a serious compliance violation.
Well, and you talk about temporarily moving. I've seen a lot of folks that just completely moved and they're not going to go back to the city. So if you have an employee that was in New York City and now they're in Des Moines, Iowa permanently, you really got to take a look at that. So, and also from a workers' comp standpoint, you need to make sure that you're paying work comp premiums in the state where your employee resides. And a lot of people forget that, because if that person's hurt, your New York policy is not going to pay. And
if they get hurt in their workplace, it is a workers' comp claim. So if they're working for you and they trip over their scanning machine that's sitting on the floor, that is a workers' comp claim. And things like workplace safety and OSHA and ergonomic use of this. The other thing that's a really big deal also is cybersecurity. And I know that a lot of agencies are like, we only have 8 employees. Like, we don't write that much business. We're not going to be a threat. It's not a government actor. Russia's not looking for your agency. But the people that are criminals. And so whereas organized crime used to be for drugs and human trafficking, now they just want to hack into your little agency system and kidnap your data for you to throw them $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 in order to give it back. And the whole Twitter hack that happened last year, I know we've talked about this before, but the thing that when Twitter got hacked and everybody ended up having, whether it was Jeff Bezos or Kim Kardashian or whatever, they had this cryptocurrency hack on their Twitter account. Those were 15-year-old kids that did that. And those same 15-year-old kids can open up a phone book and try and get your employees to reset their password, collect your data, and take your entire association management system hostage. And if you're not behind a firewall or you have not set up some sort of a code or password to avoid some phishing, you could, there's small actors, but I don't know about you, but it would hurt me to have to pay $50,000 to get my data back. And we're all vulnerable now that we're no longer behind a company firewall in a brick and mortar.
And fortunately for us, our Agents Council for Technology has issued a really good cybersecurity guide for agencies, a pocket guide they can use. So go to our website at independentagent.com and look for the cybersecurity guide under the ACT resources, please. Because Claudia's right. I mean, how many people have reached out to you personally to try to get your information? I mean,
Oh yeah.
on a daily basis. I mean, my friend in Nigeria, he's always on my email.
I know. I seem to also be getting something from a rabbi that really has a family that needs a lot of my money, and I don't know who that is or where they are, but yeah, no, there's a lot of phishing out there. But this was simply these kids. It was they basically called up and said, "Hey, I'm Steve with IT. There's something weird with your account. I just need you to reset it. I'm going to send you a thing." And they did it. Like it was not even. They're 15-year-old kids,
yeah.
and they want your money.
And they're getting it.
They're getting it. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, let's go to our sort of ending thing, our Claudia's crystal ball.
Yes. So it's along these same lines. We've seen some data come out. Forrester Research Group took a look, and they found that 60% of businesses are going to continue some hybrid work. 10% are just giving up their bricks and mortar and going 100% virtual, and only 30% say they're coming back. And I would bet that part of that 30% are not 100%. Like there still may be one person who's working more flexible hours, more remotely. So that means that 70% of workplaces are some level of hybrid. And if it's not you as an agency, it could be your clients, it could be your vendors, it could be the people that you're calling on. And that's really changing the dynamic of a workplace. And some of the issues that we're thinking about is, how do you manage performance? You know, a lot of these agency owners we've talked to, they're like, we want to get everybody back. We want butts in seats because we want them to be more productive. And my question is always, how do you know they're not? What are you looking at? What are the data that you're looking at to support your notions that they're not being productive, other than you can't like see them banging on a keyboard? Is it productive? Are they productive? So performance management is going to continue to be a huge thing with this remote work. I think we're also going to see some real challenges around the people that are in the office. They get face time, so they're more likely to get advances. The people who are out of the office, who are probably more likely to be women, are not going to have that. So we really need to be very intentional about how we manage these two workforces so that we don't exacerbate disparate treatment or further put people who are already running behind the eight ball farther behind the eight ball. The other thing about what's happening in the workforce these days, people are thinking that there's a lot of unemployment, and there kind of is, but they're not the people that you want to hire. And I will tell you that I've been struggling with a few agencies. They want to hire somebody in a very remote office, a small city. They want them to have certain licensing. They want them to be in the office all the time, and they want to pay them $35,000. And that's a unicorn. That person does not exist. And as the labor market continues to be tight, I do think that agency owners need to look at compensation. It's tight, and we need to revisit what we're paying. We need to look at the experience that folks are trying to hire for, and we need to be more flexible about butts and seats, especially if that seat is in the middle of nowhere. In this one case, we ran a search on all of our resume databases. There were only 3 people in the entire geography that alone had the licensing that they were looking for, let alone would be willing to accept that pay for that work. So I think the labor forecast is continued tight labor market, continued tight unemployment, and that pay is going to be a challenge unless folks are really creative at looking at what they're paying and fixing their internal pay scales and their external competitiveness.
So do you feel like employers are sort of compressing their pay, or what should they be doing to get into a place that's more competitive?
So that's a great question, and I think there's 2 pieces to it. A lot of them have been bringing in talent, and they've had to pay more than they maybe wanted to, but they never fixed their internal pay equity. So now you've got disparities between people who are doing the same thing, but their pay may not be the same, or somebody with less experience is making more than what it should be in parity to the other person. So I think they need to look at their internal pay from a parity standpoint, and I think they need to look at their external pay from a competitiveness standpoint. If there's talent out there and they have what you want and they can do what you want, but they are not coming to work for you because of what you're paying, you're not paying enough. There are no other variables when it comes to hiring. It's pay, experience, and location. That's it. And if they're in your location and they have your experience, but you can't hire them, it's because of your pay. So it's really looking at that. The other thing is these minimum wages, as they creep up, if you're paying your account managers the equivalent of $18, $19 an hour, and now minimum wage is $15, you're getting pushed. You're getting pushed from an external competitiveness and an internal parity equity standpoint.
That's really some good advice, because I understand what you're saying, because the market is very competitive now. But if you bring in someone that has less experience than, say, Jennifer, and we pay them $20,000 more, that's going to cause a lot of internal issues that you don't want to handle.
Absolutely. And we haven't moved on this. We have not moved the needle on compensation for 3 years, 4 years. Yes. And so that's a lot of wage stagnation. And with that tight labor market, it really is. And I can't remember whether I said this already in this, but we have sold more compensation work within the last 2.5 months than we have within the last 3.5 years combined. Because it's all of a sudden, what should we be paying? We don't even know anymore. And that's a real conversation that a lot of companies are struggling with, not just in the insurance industry space, but across most businesses.
Well, so that's interesting. That's something we probably need to do a special brochure for people to get in touch with you about, that one topic, because I think a lot of agencies are probably going to be facing that. If they're doing a lot of new hiring, they're probably facing that already.
Exactly. And I don't want folks to be frustrated because they're looking for a unicorn. They need to take off those rosy glasses and look at it for what it is, which is, it's a tight labor market. Yes, we were at 14% unemployment, but those 14% of people that were unemployed were not the people that you were looking to hire. Anybody who's good did not lose their job. They're still there. They had their work. That you have to be competitive in order to get them.
Claudia, you are a wealth of knowledge, and thank goodness Affinity HR is here to help walk us through this, because, wow, it's a lot.
Well, and I'm sorry, because I kind of feel like we should just open up a bottle of bourbon after this, because I always bring like the worst news to everybody. We really are fun, happy people. We're not downers all the time, but it's a serious. There's some big systemic challenges that a lot of agencies and other industries, businesses need to be paying attention to.
So before we close up for today, I want you to touch again on your special 1 hour of COVID-19 HR help that's available to our members. I think it's such a great help, and I hope folks have been using it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the offer to share them with it. Basically, what we've set up is 1 free hour of HR, not free, sorry, prepaid. Prepaid hour of consulting support to help you navigate COVID, what to do with the myriad of rules that are changing regularly, vaccinate, don't vaccinate, what happens when you have a sticky situation with somebody doesn't want to come into the office, whatever, somebody ends up being sick, whatever it is. The virus is still very much out there, and unfortunately we're still tackling basic fundamental infections and exposures still. We also have a range of services that we provide to Big I members, and so beyond that special COVID hour, if you were to reach out to us, we'd be happy to talk with you about that. If you go to our website, which is AffinityHRgroup.com/Big I hires, you'll see our menu of services, which includes compensation work and recruiting and some of the other challenges that we did talk about today on today's webcast.
A lot of information. I really appreciate your being here today to talk about all these new things that are coming, and probably many more things to come.
Yes, I imagine there's a lot of stuff barreling down on us, and we will do our best to let you know about it before it flattens all of us.
Well, again, thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Jennifer. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.